You're watching News at Prime. Let's bring you this story now. A motorist in Johannesburg has allegedly gunned down 3 suspected hijackers on the N1 in Soweto. It's believed the group tried to attack the person, who in turn killed all 3. The incident has again brought to the fore the debate on whether South Africans should own guns to protect themselves as crime levels rise ever so increasingly. Let's speak now to the South African Gunowners Association representative, Damian Enslin. And Damian, good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. I don't know if you are familiar with the incident that occurred today on the N1 highway, we're told, near Soweto. Firstly, what are your thoughts around that? Would this person have been able to survive this alleged attack had he not had a gun?
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good evening to your viewers. So we as SAGA believe in the right of every law-abiding citizen to choose to own a firearm. And obviously choosing to own a firearm these days in the crime-ridden South Africa is for primarily, more often than not, for self-defense. So absolutely, law-abiding citizens with the right training, the right know-how, and also the legal know-how and the consequences of using a firearm and when to use a firearm in the right conditions, we believe that every law-abiding citizen has that right. And if they're able to lawfully defend their lives, so be it. And of course, as you correctly identified, we have a major crime situation in South Africa, and the police obviously are seemingly inability to control crime has created the situation that law-abiding citizens have to unfortunately arm themselves and protect themselves.
What does the law say, Damian? Because now that you bring up that particular issue, what does the law say if someone is threatened and possibly threatened with a gun? Are you expected to wait for someone to shoot first before you can shoot back? What exactly is the situation?
No, the law in South Africa in regards to self-defense is quite clear. There must be an imminent unlawful attack against you or your family or yourself or your friends. And in these circumstances, if we go have regard to the incident that occurred earlier today, it appears that there was an unlawful imminent attack. It's alleged that hijackers obviously were attempting to hijack this private individual, and he used his firearm in self-defense. So obviously it's always difficult to comment on existing current cases because one doesn't want to jeopardize that case, but you are entitled to use a firearm against someone. To answer your question, you don't have to wait for someone to shoot at you first. If someone is brandishing a firearm and pointing in your direction and towards you, you're well within your rights to draw your firearm and shoot back and defend your life or someone else's life. So it's an unlawful imminent attack that's happening against you, and you are allowed to defend your life in those circumstances.
Let's assume that you are driving in your vehicle, and again, this is a completely hypothetical situation. We don't know the facts of what happened on that N1 highway today, but the assumption here is that these are people who are trying to get you off the road, and you're not sure whether they are carrying weapons because possibly they are not brandishing them yet. Do you open fire nonetheless because you feel threatened?
You've got to be careful about just opening fire. So you have to be able to identify the situation. Now, it is a difficult situation to be in. If someone forcibly forces your vehicle off the road, one of the best situations is try and get away if you can. I mean, we obviously believe in the right to use a firearm in self-defense because we're very circumspect when you use that firearm. And that's where training and the use of firearms become very important. So we feel as a South African Gunowners Association, so although you have a right to use a firearm, know how to use it and when to use it correctly in the correct manner. So that is a difficult situation, and you've got to, in those circumstances, make a quick call as to whether you should use your firearm, and be careful when you use a firearm because innocent bystanders could be hurt. And sometimes better in those circumstances to drive off, but of course, where you're cornered and you have no choice. So I've represented clients who have been cornered, their vehicles been cornered by other vehicles and keep people come at them with guns and knives and that, then certainly you have no choice and you have the right then to shoot back. But it's careful about just drawing your firearm and shooting indiscriminately in a situation where it could potentially just be a road rage situation where someone bashes your car, bumps your car. But clearly, if it's a situation where they're trying to box you in or trying to do more than just sort of bump your car, then certainly you will be in your rights to draw your firearm and shoot back. But you'll be very circumspect about that situation, and it depends a lot on the circumstances surrounding the incident.
Is it advisable to shoot to kill, or you shoot someone to injure them? I don't know what the mechanics are around that, so that I think I would want to avoid killing someone, but at least destabilize them to such an extent that they are unable to carry out whatever attack. Would that be the advice if you feel that you must now actually start pulling the trigger?
So our training and what we say to people is use your firearm to stop the attack. And that might be shooting the person in normally center mass, their body itself. That's the easiest target when someone is coming at you. So not ready to shoot to kill, but to shoot to stop the imminent attack, to stop the attackers. Unfortunately, quite often or not, obviously, the perpetrator, the alleged hijacker, alleged perpetrator, is killed during the result. But we say shoot until the actual attack stops. And sometimes that could be 1 or 2 shots or 3 shots, depending on the circumstances. So what we're saying is we're not shooting to kill, but we're shooting to stop the perpetrator, stop the attacker. And that's the objective, is to stop the imminent attack against you.
In the environment in which we find ourselves, Damian, we have reported on one mass shooting after another on this channel, and it seems to be spread across the various provinces. Do you think that situations like that, or in an environment like this, people are going to be more resistant to handing over their guns so that we live in a gun-free society? Or do you believe it is the opposite that is now going to happen? With more mass shootings, people are going to feel that their lives are possibly not safe, and therefore I'm not willing to part with my gun.
Well, look, we will never have a utopian society, a gun-free South Africa, because unfortunately the problem in the whole equation is criminals. The criminals will always use something as a tool, whether it be a knife, a gun, or some sort of axe or some sort of weapon. So the problem is, if you try outlaw all guns, only law-abiding citizens will be abiding by that law. The criminals will never abide by the law. The criminals will always find a problem. So I want to separate that. With regards to these mass shootings, a lot of the mass shootings are gang violence. So gangsters, especially here in the Western Cape where I am, a lot of the shootings has occurred between gangsters. And that's very difficult for anyone to control the criminal gang violence into gang violence. Unfortunately, what happens is a lot of innocent bystanders often get hit in those sort of situations with gang violence and turf wars and that. But of course, a law-abiding citizen has a right to defend their life if they need to, and if they feel the most appropriate way, and sometimes the only appropriate way is the ownership of the gun, then they must do that, and they must arm themselves, but again, with the right and effective training and legal knowledge. So mass shootings, we've got to be careful of comparing mass shootings to mass shootings elsewhere. Our mass shootings quite often are gang-related, inter-gang turf wars, but unfortunately the side show of that is unfortunate innocents being hit in the crossfire on that.
Yeah, I guess the moral of my question here, Damian, is we live in a violent society, and in order for guns to disappear, it is encouraged that even law-abiding citizens, the ones who own guns with licenses, they are encouraged to hand those guns over so that if and when attacked, their guns are not used against them by the perpetrators. This is all in an effort to live in a gun-free society. So I guess what I'm saying is that in an increasingly violent society, are people going to be eager to hand over their guns, or it's the inverse that is likely to happen?
It's unlikely. I mean, it's unlikely that people are going to hand in their firearms if we're living in a crime-ridden society where there's, especially in obviously Western Cape and in gang-infested areas where there's a good chance of you being killed by a gangster or criminal. So it's very unlikely in those circumstances. But again, we're not living in a utopian society. We're living in a crime-ridden society, and especially in some communities that can't afford private security, the only choice then is to obtain a firearm, a legal firearm. We only obviously work on legal firearms. And again, as I said, what comes with that, once you've made that choice to own a firearm, get the training, get the know-how, because you have to know when you can shoot and when you can't shoot, and also need to know the legal consequences of what comes after the shooting incident itself. And that comes with knowledge and training, and joining an organization like the South African Gunowners Association. That's what we're there to do, is to train our law-abiding citizens so they know when to use the firearm in the correct manner and the correct place.
I think that's a very interesting point to end this conversation, that after an incident has occurred where you are the person with a gun that is legal, you have a license, you were threatened, you felt threatened, and here you are now, you've killed someone. What is the legal process that follows thereafter?
Okay, so I'm a practicing attorney and I specialize in firearm matters, but what we always advise someone in those circumstances is consult with an attorney immediately. Get the right advice about the circumstances, because whatever you say can be used against you in a court of law. And quite often, in that emotional state that you've been through, because it's a highly emotional state, no one really wants to shoot and kill someone else in any circumstances. So we advise consult with the attorney, get the proper legal advice, because there is the potential of you being charged with something, charged with murder, and having to run the course of a court process, which can be highly stressful, and involves costs as well, hiring attorneys and advocates to represent you in court potentially. However, my personal experience with shooting incidences is more often not the police understand the circumstances. It depends a lot on the training the police officer you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But my personal experience has been that the police have always been listened to what has occurred, and then willing to obviously deal with it further down the line. But unfortunately, the consequences can be that you can be arrested, you can be charged, you may spend a couple of days in jail whilst you get bail. But it depends a lot on the circumstances of how the incident occurred. But we definitely advise consult with an attorney immediately, get the proper legal advice, because things can be misconstrued. And even when statements are taken by the police, they also sometimes take statements down incorrectly in that sort of highly emotive state that you may be in. So definitely consult with an attorney and prepare to obviously, unfortunately, have to pay a fair amount of money in some circumstances in having yourself defended. So that unfortunately is one of the consequences of a shooting incident, the possibility of being charged with something and having to go through the court process.
Yeah. Damian Enslin, thank you very much for your time. He is with the South African Gunowners Association.